Once upon a time, deep in a lush forest, there lived a bear named Mr. Bear. He was known for his love of honey. He could spend hours dreaming about the sweet golden liquid, imagining it dripping off his paws. Unfortunately for Mr. Bear, the only source of honey in the forest came from the busy bees, who guarded their hive fiercely. One day, as the sun glowed warmly over the forest, Mr. Bear's stomach grumbled. His craving for honey was stronger than ever, and he decided that today would be the day he finally got his paws on some. But there was a problem. Mr. Bear had never been good at negotiating, especially with the bees. Determined, Mr. Bear marched through the woods and approached the tall tree where the beehive hung. He stared up at the hive, his eyes wide with longing. The bees buzzed busily, flying in and out, completely focused on their work. Maybe if I ask nicely, they'll share a little, Mr. Bear thought. Clearing his throat, he spoke up in his deepest, friendliest voice. "Hello, dear bees. I was wondering if you could share a bit of your honey with me. I'm quite hungry, and I would be so grateful." The bees barely noticed him. They continued buzzing around, too busy gathering nectar and making honey to listen to Mr. Bear's polite request. Feeling ignored, Mr. Bear decided to get a little closer. He placed his paws on the tree and began to climb. The closer he got to the hive, the more tempting the honey seemed. But the bees didn't like this at all. As Mr. Bear reached out to grab the hive, the bees swarmed out in anger. They buzzed loudly around his head, and before he could react, they stung him on the nose. With a loud roar of pain, Mr. Bear tumbled down the tree, holding his nose in his paws. "Ouch! That hurt!" Mr. Bear grumbled, feeling the sting. Defeated, Mr. Bear sat at the base of the tree, rubbing his sore nose and feeling sorry for himself. "I just wanted a little honey," he muttered. "Why is it so hard to ask?" As he sat there, a wise old owl who had been watching the whole thing flew down and perched on a branch nearby. "Mr. Bear," the owl said in a calm voice, "honey doesn't come for free, especially from bees who work so hard to make it." Mr. Bear looked up at the owl, his ears perked in interest. "But what can I do? The bees won't share and I can't take it from them." The owl thought for a moment, then smiled. "You need to show them that you're willing to help. Why don't you plant some flowers around their hive? If you make their lives easier, they might be more willing to share." Mr. Bear, though skeptical, decided to take the owl's advice. Over the next few days, he planted wildflowers near the hive, giving the bees plenty of nectar to collect. He didn't bother them or try to take their honey. Instead, he quietly tended to the flowers, hoping the bees would notice. Sure enough, after a few days, the bees realized that Mr. Bear's flowers were making their work much easier. Grateful for his help, they decided to reward him. One sunny afternoon, the bees flew down to where Mr. Bear was resting and left a small piece of honeycomb for him. Surprised and delighted, Mr. Bear carefully tasted the honey. It was the sweetest he had ever had, and it was all the more delicious because it had been given to him out of kindness. From that day on, Mr. Bear and the bees lived in harmony. He continued to plant flowers for them, and in return, they occasionally shared their honey. Mr. Bear learned an important lesson. Sometimes the best way to get what you want is to help others first.